how can a doctor wear clothes like this? I said, hello, I work as a doctor. My profession is doctor. I can do whatever else I want to do.
Yeah.
But that's the culture we have. I think, Chris, it's a good time to start now. I'll just share the screen with everyone and share the data that we collected that day, so that everybody sort of, awareness is the first step, I think, to changing things. So let me just go back to that data. Where is that thing? Oops, sorry. That was YouTube. So as Chris, you kindly permitted, I'm just streaming it on YouTube, and I'll edit it later, just so that this stays for us to refer back to your thoughts. So coming to the data, we have a gender imbalance in our department, which is my next agenda to resolve. We have 81% males. Most of us are in our 30s. And I think I'm the oldest person at 43. And unfortunately, majority of us do not exercise every week. So 54% said that we don't exercise every week. A guesstimate of how many steps do you walk every day is ranging from never counted till around 12,000 steps. But most of us, I think, would be somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 as the graph indicates. And how many floors can you climb at a stretch? Again, we have 4 people who are saying that they can climb 5 steps, and then another person saying 5 to 6 floors. And then there's one outlier at 10 floors, but most of us are, I think, around 3 to 4 steps, 3 to 4 flights of steps at a stretch. 36% of us do not regularly exercise, and 63% are saying that they do walking, but whether they do walking as an exercise is something that I think we need to check. Weight training is done by only 2, yoga is done only by 1. And we also asked them, what is your fitness goal? So that, Chris could sort of help us to achieve that. And the responses we got is not be breathless while running and look fit, to be fit enough so that he could be an ideal for young generation, weight loss, maintaining weight, reduce belly fat, maintain cholesterol level, get back to shape in post-pregnancy, weight loss to 72 kg, weight loss to be healthy, weight loss. So it's like, okay, weight loss is the winner here. And then we have a few questions for you, Chris, which we'll, I think, take at the end. So with this background about our own fitness levels, over to you, Chris.
Okay, so look, I haven't prepared any kind of presentation or anything like that. I figured the best way to do it was just to sort of address the information that we had, as opposed to trying to, propose ideas that are unrealistic or suggest ideals based on, situations that are foreign to us. So,
Chris, can I give you one little background here again, so that we can have thing. So one is that we all work in the basement where there's no sunlight, and we are all in -2. Secondly, many of us travel at least 3 hours every day to reach home. Some of us travel 4 hours every day to come back and forth from home. So with this background.
Okay, so that's actually something I was going to address. Is, from a general health and a general movement point of view, I think there are a few things we can come back to, but starting with the steps per day, I know that you said it was a guesstimate. You've mentioned the basement there, there's no vitamin D, and obviously there's a problem throughout India generally. Most people don't get enough vitamin D here because spending time in the sun is actually it's not common. It's not necessarily part of the lifestyle, whether that's due to working long hours or whether people don't actually want to be outside in the sun because of the heat. But if we start with the steps approximately, so there's quite a broad range there, as you mentioned, between not having counted and getting up to a guesstimate of 12,000. obviously the ACSM and the WHO guidelines of 10,000 steps a day is kind of what everyone focuses on. That's what everyone tends to carry on about, and everyone who mentions steps is tracking their steps, is aiming for this magical 10,000 steps a day, and that's what you can set your defaults for on your Garmin or your Fitbits or whatever your device is. The fact is that doesn't really account for the other amounts of physical activity that people do during the day. So if you are potentially in a role where you aren't doing anything and you're sitting at a desk all day, I'd suggest that maybe 10,000 steps isn't sufficient. Maybe you should be trying to do more. But if you're in a role where you are regularly sitting to standing, you're standing for longer periods of time, you're walking to and fro, up and down, you're using the stairs, you're pushing, you're pulling. I'm not entirely sure what your guys' day-to-day involves, if you are relatively physical or not. But I'm sure there are people in the department who would be more physical than others. I'm sure you guys have staff pushing beds in and out, possibly adjusting equipment, etc. If I take my role, for example, I'm commonly, pushing and pulling patients all over the show and encouraging them to do this, or I'm lifting up weights for them, giving them weights, taking the weights away, putting the weights back on the rack. So, just to sort of look at it in a very black and white view of, is it 10,000 or is it not 10,000, is not necessarily that valuable. You need to look at it in context. So I would say that, if you're in a relatively active role, you probably don't need to worry about 10,000 necessarily. It's more just about being active throughout the day as opposed to being sedentary for long stints. And then if you're in a less active role, if you literally are desk bound, and as you said, you've got your 2-hour commute in the morning, followed by your 8, 9, 10 hours a day at the desk potentially, and then 2 hours again in the evening. The reality is that we're probably getting home and crashing on the couch, maybe opening a beer or a glass of wine or whatever, and relaxing with your family or your friends or whatever in the evenings, just to try and sort of take the edge off and relax a little bit. The fact is you're not getting much activity in at all. So in that case, you potentially need to be looking at doing, a very concerted effort, and you might need more than 10,000 steps. But it really, I suppose, the highlights package there, or the basic summary, is that it needs to be kind of, specific to your own environment. So it'd be worth talking to somebody who maybe can advise you a little bit about that. And I suppose hopefully I can do that for you guys specifically today. If you move on to the amount of stairs that people walk, the flights of stairs, this is something that always has fascinated me. I will tell you that I don't ever use an elevator at all. Literally, I don't, unless I'm going to the tower and I have to get up, a heap of flights in a relatively short space of time because I'm under the pump. But even in the tower, I'll typically try and I'll try and use the stairs. That's not any kind of brag or boast or anything. It's just an easy way to sneak in some exercise, just moving around. And we know that resistance exercise, particularly if we look at the age bracket of the people that we're talking to today, as soon as you get beyond, so there's probably a window between 21 and 28, you guys will know this, where your body starts to sort of go downhill in a number of different ways. And physically speaking, it certainly does. So we're all over that. I don't think there was anyone under the age of 20. Oh, there's a 27-year-old there. But I'd say that you're on the window. So Vishal, you should probably be paying attention anyway. So, doing things as simple as taking the stairs up and down, that's a lot of exercise for your lower body. So your large muscle groups in your lower body, your glutes and your quads. If you are using those large muscle groups in your body, you're going to tend to burn more energy, obviously, because they're larger muscles. They are in the lower body. They tend to be doing a lot more work because your entire body weight is going through them. So if you can use those a lot more during the day, that should reduce your requirement for other kinds of activity. And from a purely health point of view, sort of baseline health point of view, it's a good idea to work larger muscle groups and smaller muscle groups. So I would say one of the questions that somebody sent through was, basically how can we exercise like daily? What is a basic daily routine for exercise? And I'd say the first thing you can do if you are somebody who's at work for 8 to 10 hours and is unlikely to get to a gym, off the back of, or in between an hour to 2 hour commute outside, is just use the stairs. Use the stairs when you're going to lunch, when you go to Capel, climb up from, I suppose you guys would probably have to come across on the ground floor, maybe first floor of the tower, but then climb up to the fourth floor and climb down. If you do that a couple times, let's say you go for breakfast or you go for a coffee outside of the lunch period as well, that's a couple of flights, probably 8 to 10 flights of stairs that you can do in a day quite easily. And then from the ground floor, walking down to, I think you said it was B1 or B2, walking down. So you could really accumulate quite a few stairs if you made a simple adjustment like that, and it really isn't that hard. You might find it's a little bit tricky at first, but once you get used to it, you'll be fine. The next thing is the regular exercise question. Is this is, everyone is always asking for like some kind of a cheat. What kind of exercise can we do daily? What's the best exercise that we can do daily that we get sort of quick results? And unfortunately, much like the rest of your health, I'm sure you guys would give your patients this advice, or anyone else who had asked you. There are no magic bullets in medicine. So exercise and fitness is exactly the same. Your body responds to the environment that you put it in. But obviously, if you put it into an acute exposure of something, it's going to respond less favorably than if it is a gradual exposure to something. So exercise is exactly the same. You want consistency. So you want an exercise routine that you can actually, first of all, maintain. First of all, that you can do. So the common trend these days is getting onto YouTube and watching, well, I suppose not really YouTube, but probably Instagram now. You get onto Instagram and you see these cool, trendy, whatever influencers who are doing cool exercises on cool equipment, and they've all, they're built like supermodels and they look fantastic. They've got wonderful tans, wearing great clothes, and you think to yourself, great, I'm gonna go and do this, fitness regime. Without any consideration for your baseline level of fitness, your training history, or anything like that. So what we tend to see is people getting injured, people losing interest very quickly. They either can't do it or they get injured. So the first thing I would say is it needs to be something you can do. So that can literally be walking, it can be yoga, it can be whatever, stretching. Start with stretching. Start with a stretching routine in the morning if that's what you want to do. That's fine. Your body needs movement. It doesn't necessarily need heaps of resistance exercise, while it's very important, but as a starting point, just stretching is probably fine. So start with something that you can do. The second thing is it needs to be interesting. It needs to be something you want to do. We know from the nutrition world that, and fitness as well, but I think primarily in nutrition, more research has been done, that people find diets incredibly hard to sustain. And that tends to be because they're restrictive. So diets are telling you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And nobody actually likes dieting. Nobody likes being on a diet. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called dieting. It would just be called eating. So putting in a concerted effort to eat specific things that you don't like, or in specific patterns that you aren't comfortable with, is not sustainable. And the same thing goes for exercise. The exercise program needs to be sustainable. It needs to be consistent. That's when you get these healthcare benefits, or these health benefits rather. If we go further into the questions, weight loss came up a lot, and aesthetics was a factor in a couple of the questions as well. You're not going to get to the level where your body changes the way it looks in the mirror if you don't like what you're doing, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, because that takes a fair amount of time to induce those changes. Or look, you might, but you'll be dreadfully unhappy on the way there, which is also not ideal. We don't want to be unhappy keeping healthy. We want to be happy about the fact that we're keeping healthy. If we move on to your fitness goals, just going back to the regular exercise, I mentioned that the stretching was a great place to start. Most people said that they either walk, and as you pointed out, we're not sure if that's just through the course of the day, or if it's actually purposeful walking with a view to being fit. But regardless, walking, somebody mentioned yoga as well, I think, and some weight training. Walking and yoga are pretty much really as much as you need to do. I don't think you necessarily even have to do both. But from an overall point of view, if you would like to cover all bases, being, cardio, respiratory fitness, strength and mobility. Yoga and walking are a perfect sort of solution for that. How much do you walk? Again, how long is a piece of string? How long, how much have you previously walked? How used to walking are you? What are your goals at the end of the day? Are you trying to walk so that you can at some point run 5Ks? Are you trying to, at some point be able to run a marathon? Very different goals, very different approaches to that. But I would say if you could walk, 3 to 5 times a week, at least half an hour to 45 minutes of walking time at a reasonable intensity, not, pottering around. And then on top of that, maybe on alternating days or 2 to 3 sessions a week of some kind of other exercise, whether it's mobility or resistance training. And that can be yoga. And like I said, obviously heaps of different kinds of yoga, but it could pretty much just be stretching in the morning. Might be enough for that component as well. So it really doesn't have to be this horrible thing. I think unfortunately when people talk about fitness and training, a lot of people get put off when experts start to talk about it, because everyone's talking about how much you can do and how heavy you can push things and how fast you are, etc. But for your average person, a lot of these things are actually quite unattainable for a number of reasons. We've spoken about a lot of the lifestyle limitations that we have based on our work schedules, etc. But the last thing we want is to try and scare people off activity. We want people to be as active as possible, and we want them to enjoy it. So, when we say people need to be fitter, not everyone needs to be a triathlete. Not everyone needs to run marathons. Not everyone needs to go to gym 5 times a week and look gargantuan in the mirror. It's not the purpose at all. When we say exercise is medicine, it's about reducing the incidences of diabetes and cancers and high blood pressure and other high risk factors for strokes, heart attacks, etc. There are a number of positive benefits that you get just by literally doing a very, very minimal amount of physical activity. And that's more the point of trying to encourage people to be active. It's not because we want everyone to look good or we want everyone to be, pouring sweat out constantly and their hearts beating out of their chests. It's not necessary to sort of think of it that way. So it's good to understand that as a patient or as somebody who's trying to get into activity, that it's not necessary to be, completely shooting the lights out to see benefits. You see benefits literally just from moving. Moving on to the fitness goals, I suppose that feeds into that quite nicely is depending on what you're trying to do. So people are looking at, again, the aesthetics, not being breathless while running, trying to lose weight. It's probably a good time to point out the common saying that you can't outrun a bad diet. Now, it's very relevant because unfortunately people think that, if they're really pushing themselves, they can eat whatever they want. Not true, but by the same token, it doesn't mean that the opposite is true. It doesn't mean that diet isn't important, or rather you don't need to exercise if you're on a good diet. So combination of the two is always better than any or either of those in individually, and that has been shown in research, that a combination of maintaining a sort of controlled diet, looking at a control group, an exercise group, and then diet and exercise actually lost more weight, improved their fitness measures, and more importantly than anything else, in my opinion, is that they managed to sustain the changes down the road when there was a review of the participants at a later date. So it's important to understand that you can't. Well, look, it depends on your age as well. I suppose we've all been teenagers and early 20-year-olds where we were probably eating all sorts of garbage and staying out late and drinking and partying and doing whatever. And really our bodies were able to tolerate it a lot better than they are now, certainly. But the point is that you can't just shove garbage in the system and expect to keep getting, good results out. So you need to eat properly, but you also do need to exercise, because things like muscle bulk, adiposity or reduced adiposity. These things are all connected with health benefits, long-term health benefits. So fitness goals seem pretty much to be weight loss. There's a comment about BMI here. It's probably worth mentioning as well that BMI really as a fitness measure is pretty much garbage. I hope this isn't going to be broadcast all over YouTube, but it really isn't a great measure of anything. I think it was probably a measure or a classification system that came in for research purposes at some point, but really it's not valuable beyond that. You can't really predict a heap from BMI, and certainly not an athletic population, or from a fitness point of view. It doesn't tell you anything. I know that obviously the sort of gross classifications of BMI and obesity have been linked to a number of sort of lifestyle conditions and diseases, but from a fitness point of view, there's an interesting graphic that I actually meant to get hold of. Maybe I'll send it through to you, Prasad, and we can and you can circulate it with everyone. But it's an interesting graphic where they looked at a number of athletes from the Premier League, NHL, NFL, a number of different sports, NBA, and basically they showed the three sort of isobars for in the BMI, so sort of underweight, ideal weight, just before obesity and obesity. And they showed that these athletes were just all over the show. Like literally it's a complete scattergun all over this thing. So there was very few athletes, obviously relatively trending towards, the ideal weight, but there were athletes all over the place. So it's just a good reminder of the fact that you really shouldn't let BMI rule your life. Don't panic too much about BMI. It's more important how you feel, not necessarily how you look. Again, I know a lot of people are into it for the aesthetics, but your body doesn't care what you look like. Your body's not going to live longer because you look good. It really does matter how your body functions and how you feel. If we go on to I think that's pretty much it. I think I've covered everything. I think I've covered everything that you sent through. So besides the questions, do you want to just move on to those? Should I try and answer those as best we can, or do you want to open it to discussion and people can ask directly? Or
I think it would be nice if we can ask people to ask questions directly, because that would be, I think, more interactive.
A little bit more interactive, yeah.
Yeah. So open for questions. Sanket, why don't you start with your questions first, and then we'll have everyone else ask questions.
Yes, surely, sir. Hi, Chris. As you told, stairs are the best exercise.
Hi, Sanket.
As you told, stairs are the best exercise to start with. But when we start our initial exercise, we overcome with the muscle pulls. Because once personally, I tried climbing up 15 floors to the cafeteria. And I hardly managed for 2 days, because on the third day, I started pulling my legs and I started using the lift.
Yeah.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, no, look, I think I covered that earlier. It's important to understand what sort of a baseline you're coming from. So, like I said, your body is a living thing, okay? Now, all living things respond to the environment in which they live. If you take your body out of one environment and you put it into another environment that is vastly different from where it exists, you can expect that there's going to be quite an abrupt response, or quite a large response. Whereas if you gradually move it out of the comfort zone into that more uncomfortable thing, you can imagine that your body, being a living thing, is going to adapt. And that's effectively how training works. That's how everything works. That's how detraining works. That's how disease works. That's how literally everything in life works. If it's a living thing, it adapts to the environment you put it in. If you put it in a poisonous environment, gradually over time, it might learn to get better at managing that poison, much like we deal with viruses and develop antibodies, et cetera, Or if you give it an aggressive acute overload of some kind of infection, it might be too great for the body to to deal with. Exactly the same thing with your stairs.
Oh.
If you, let's say, decide, right, this week I'm going to take the stairs every alternate day, and I'm going to take you pick a part of it, so you're gonna take the elevator halfway up, and then you'll take the stairs for the other 5 flights. And that's a reasonable place to start. So then you do that 3 days. So you go every alternate day. So you go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you do that, and then you take the weekend off. The rest of your day is absolutely normal routine, what you would ordinarily do. Then the next week you say, right, well, how did I feel? It's always important to reassess and go back. You don't just look at it. Our lives are not textbook either. So you reassess and you say, well, actually, jeepers, I still feel like I'm battling a little bit. This is quite hard. Then you do it again. Then you go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, again. And gradually you'll build up a little bit of tolerance. Eventually, one of the Mondays, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, on the Monday, you'll feel, I actually feel a little bit easier. Or you'll go through that first flight of stairs and you say, well, that wasn't too hard. Okay, well, let me see if I can do maybe on Wednesday and Friday, let me try and only go up to the 3rd floor as opposed to going up to the 7th floor and walking up to the 15th. Let me go up to the 3rd floor and see if I can do the rest. And gradually you just start to drip in a little bit more stimulus for your body to adapt. You're just exposing your body to extra stuff. If you expose it to a heap of stuff all, at once, then you're asking for trouble. I'm not sure hopefully this isn't sensitive. I'm going to say it anyway. I don't know if everyone on the group drinks, but if everyone is familiar with the concept of what alcohol does to the body, okay? So I'm South African and I do drink. I enjoy red wine. Unfortunately, I don't get a lot of South African red wine out here, but as and when I do enjoy it. So if you've ever drunk alcohol before, or if you've ever seen anyone drink alcohol, or you understand the concept of what alcohol does to the body, we should all basically, because of our training anyway. If you've never drunk before, and you have, let's say, a sip of wine, 2 sips of wine, half a glass of wine, you're probably going to be feeling, maybe a little bit lightheaded. You might feel like, a little bit dizzy. I don't know. There'll be some kind of, physiological response to that poison that we've put in our system. But you liked it. It was quite fun. You were with a number of friends. It was a cool environment. So, the next weekend, the same situation arises and you say, oh, yeah, cool, magic. I'll have half a glass of red wine. After a while, you manage to tolerate that half a glass of red wine a little bit better, and you start to drink a little bit more. This is how most people start drinking. And then, from the age of 18, when this started, to maybe the age of 23 or 24, you're probably sitting around the table and you can manage maybe 2 or 3 glasses of wine before you feel like maybe you need to really lock it up and stop before you start misbehaving. What's happened over that period of time is that you've adapted to that stimulus, to that alcohol stimulus. Your body has adapted. It's taken the information. It's gone, right, well, this is something we need to get better at managing. So, and it manages it better. Now, what would happen on the first day you started that if you drank the whole bottle? Okay, you certainly wouldn't have been in good shape the next day.
Yes.
You potentially ended up in hospital.
Wouldn't be sitting at the same place.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't be sitting at the same place at 23, and you wouldn't be sitting at the same place the next day. So the point there is you're effectively trying to walk up 15 flights of stairs. You've tried to down a bottle day 1. Okay, so what we need to do is think of it in realistic terms. You wouldn't try and drink a bottle of wine in one go if you'd never done it before. So why would you try and walk up 15 flights of stairs if you'd never done it before?
Yes, I do got my answer. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I got my answer that I have to gradually increase my stairs one step at a go. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And you might get to a point where day 1, walking 15 flights of stairs from nothing is probably asking way too much. But maybe once you're doing 15 flights, maybe moving from 15 flights to 30 flights, it's not the same leap. Once you have a little bit of volume in your training behind you, you can start to explore a little bit more. So it's not necessarily that 15 flights, 15 flights increase is huge and it's impossible and humans shouldn't do that. It entirely needs to be based on the context. Where is it coming from?
Any other
Next
questions?
question, please.
You can ask the same question that you sent in the Excel sheet also, so it becomes more interactive.
I mean, I can pull people out by name if you'd like, and we can discuss your questions. Would that work?
Yeah, that's fine. If people want to ask questions, they can unmute and ask.
Unless they want anonymity. Okay, so let's start with, there was a question about an appropriate age, the age and fitness appropriate sport to start at the age of 33 for a female. There's no real right or wrong answer here. Again, if you were paying attention to the last answer, it really just depends on where you're coming from. What have you done previously? There's absolutely no rules or laws that say that this sport is a no-no beyond such and such an age, or this activity is ill-advised if X, Y, and Z. Honestly, you can do anything you want to if you keep that principle in mind of gradual load, gradual exposure, gradually increased exposure over a long period of time consistently. You can pretty much do whatever you want. So it's never too late to start anything really. But it is very, very important that you're sensible about how you start, particularly with things like high impact activities. So, starting yoga is probably a lot less stressful than starting, road running or plyometrics in the gym. If you're going to start that, it might take quite a bit of preparation and a little bit of extra effort from a sort of, prep point of view than just signing up for a yoga class. You should be relatively okay. But that said, even I know that there are different kinds of yoga. There's I'm not sure of the name. Somebody can help me out. But you can move from pose to pose, or you can hold a pose for a very long time. Now, I always tell patients that I much prefer them getting into the kind of yoga where they move from pose to pose, because your body likes movement. It doesn't like being held in a sustained posture for any significant period of time, really. We've trained our bodies to sit for this long. We shouldn't be able to. We really shouldn't be happy sitting for as long as we do. So I'd like, if you do want to start yoga at at any point in your life and you've never got a history of yoga, I'd say that's definitely the place to start, is in the movements, the constant movement flowing through things, as opposed to getting into a position, holding as hard as you can, or worse, getting somebody else to push you and hold you in that position. That's also not a good idea.
And that's a vinyasa type of yoga where you have movements built into the system. And as Anjali has rightly pointed out, I think the simplest thing that we can do is even Surya Namaskar, which is so very simple, and it's really sort of creates a beautiful movement along. And Sanket actually runs an initiative in our department which is related to fitness, where they use an app and they track the steps traveled, and then we publishes it every week, who's the winner. So I think maybe, Sanket, we can work out something where we can do a little bit more than that in our department. We take Chris's advice on that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's move on. Same person had asked about evaluation for body type and starting to train swimming or table tennis or badminton. With regards to the body type, much the same answer. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. There's no specific sport for specific body types. It's all just about how you gradually expose yourself to that. And then the specific exercises preparing your body before training for those sports, there absolutely are, but it's probably not the right time to go into specific exercises for 3 different sports now. It's very easy to I suppose offer that advice though, and you're more than welcome to come and chat to me anytime during the day. I'm on the 3rd floor of the Heritage Building, usually in room 309, or you might find me in the gym. And by all means, come and chat to me for 5-10 minutes. I'm very happy to give you advice on a few basics to get started. Looking at the fundamentals of the sport that you're trying to do. Is it a speed sport? Is it a power sport? Is it a stability type of sport? Is it endurance? What does it entail? And then, maybe giving you 1 or 2 pointers and things to start with. I'm just going to do these in order, actually. I think it's the easiest thing to do. Lowering blood pressure by exercise was a question. I think Anjali is probably the best person to speak to about this, but I would say that consistency again is the key. If you look at how your body responds to any kind of stimulus, it doesn't happen overnight. So trying to kill yourself in HIIT classes or in spinning classes is probably not going to help your blood pressure acutely as much as a sustained, consistent, I would say probably, like zone 2 type of training. If you're looking at your heart rates, if everyone has a heart rate measurement, or you can at least, I don't like the 220 minus your age or the 200 minus your age, if depending on male or female. I'd say just get out and try and raise your own heart rate as high as you can go and use that as a measure. An easy way to do that is just consistently walking up a hill and trying to jog up a hill and just not giving yourself a rest. And you should max out pretty much close to your heart rate. And then, or you can do that on a treadmill, obviously. If you are a runner, it's pretty easy. You just basically do sprint repeats and you don't allow yourself enough time for your heart rate to come down to resting. But once you have an idea of what your maximal heart rate is, try and work out around about sort of 70-75% of that, which would be around zone 2, what we would refer to as zone 2, and consistently training in zone 2. It seems like a really, really pointless and poor exercise session, to be honest. If you have any kind of exercise exposure, it's like actually hard to keep your heart rate at zone 2. It like always goes up because you feel like you're not doing enough. But it's actually from a health and benefits point of view, it's the best place to train for things like heart rate, blood pressure, cholesterol, etc. So that's definitely the best way to do that. Exercise and proper diet to maintain weight. I think we've probably covered. The diet, I would suggest, again, needs to be consistent with something that is actually sustainable for you. There's no point in trying to, the reason people can't do these things is because they're all fads. You come across some headline or some article or something on Instagram again, and it's like, oh wow, amazing, look at these results, let me try that. And then in 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, it's like you're either sick of the food you're eating, it's too expensive, or it's too hard to find, or it's too hard to prepare, or it's just it's not what you like. So you laugh it off, you fall off the wagon, so to speak, and then whatever, and then you blame that diet was rubbish, it didn't work. So the diet isn't rubbish. There aren't really any rubbish diets. It's the fact that you can't actually stick to it. So much like exercise, the best exercises in the world are rubbish exercises if the patient won't do them or if the patient can't do them. It matters what gets done, not what's written on the paper. It's the same thing with diet, really. What diet and exercise should follow after 40 years? I don't know that there's a huge difference. Again, everything in context depends on where you come from. The only thing I would suggest as we get older is we obviously need a relatively high amount of protein to maintain muscle balance. We don't want sarcopenia creeping in because that's when you start to get sort of health issues as well, and things like osteoporosis, bone concerns, etc. So a slightly higher protein diet probably when you get a little bit older. But again, that's not really my forte. So you might want to just pull in one of the sports dietitians or nutritionists at the hospital. Will probably give you a better in-depth answer than that. Specific abdominal exercises to get back in shape post-pregnancy, done in a short time at home. Okay, so there are a few factors there to look at. Done in a short time, hopefully I've answered that already. There are no shortcuts. There are no magic bullets, unfortunately. So it doesn't matter what you aim to achieve or what the goal is. It needs to be realistic based on where you're coming from. And even if you're fit, if your goal changes slightly, you're not really going to get any huge changes in response from your body within 4 to 6 weeks. So there's nothing really that can happen quickly in your body based on the stimulus you give it, exercise stimulus anyway. But
Chris,
depending on
about
how,
this question, I interpreted it slightly differently. I think the person asking that question was asking that that particular exercise should not take too much time every day. Quick means, I mean, they could finish it maybe in 10 minutes instead of like 1 hour because of the time constraint.
Okay, got you. Okay, cool. No, that's perfect. So then, okay, so no shortcut still applies, but depending on how postpartum you are, so obviously there's safety concern for the pelvic floor. Incontinence is an issue, obviously, in postpartum mums. Well, what kind of delivery was it? Was it normal or was it a Caesar? All of those things are factors. And it would be worth touching base with a women's health physio specifically for your case, just to try and find out. But general guideline, you would want to start with pelvic floor exercises, because that's obviously the region of the part of that region that's taken the most strain carrying, you know, a baby for 9 months. Obviously, first couple of months aren't that strenuous, but it certainly gets very strenuous towards the end. I know from, I suppose, not my own personal experience, but very close experience. My wife is just a little girl, so she's gradually trying to get back into exercise, and it's tricky. It's very hard, you know. So simple things. What I've advised her is to try and get out every day and try and walk for 10, 15, 20 minutes, just gradually try and bump it up. Obviously monitoring any symptoms around that area, around that region, making sure everything is comfortable. Didn't do anything for the first 3 weeks. Literally it was like, you know, gentle stretches and movements on the floor, low back stuff, so cat camel movements, kind of your yoga type of things. And obviously as soon as there's any kind of impact, you start looking at things like incontinence, etc. So you need to sort of gradually bring those in. If you're looking at abdominals, like your sort of your actual belly, or your rectus abdominis and that, your crunches, your sit-ups, you don't want to be pushing too hard, obviously, because you have a separation in the linear ulna. So you don't want to be forcing that. You might end up having a bit of coning in the abdomen during those exercises, which obviously means that it hasn't settled yet. You don't want to be doing any exercise with coning. And you can actually feel that. You can test. So you can stick your fingers into that space between the right and left rectus. And if you have, basically the guideline is, if you want to be having like maximum 1 finger space between there, and you're still not going to go hell for leather. At that point, you can start doing very short arc exercises, and a very basic one is just to line your back in a crip-like position with your knees bent. Just rest your hands on your thighs and gently curl up until you feel that muscle activating, and then slowly curl down. Gently curl up, slowly curl down, and you shouldn't really need to get further than maybe 5 centimeters of movement with your hands. And that's really the baseline, is you're starting to activate that muscle without applying too much stress through the connective tissue elements of that area, and risking the coning and the delayed union of the connective tissue. Isometric exercises are also very good. Not things like planks. You know, that's quite a high level isometric exercise. Something basic like a Pallof press, where you could, I suppose it's probably better for me to actually just show you. I don't know, I hope the person is on the call, but effectively, if you have resistance coming from, let me show you this way. I have resistance coming from something over there, so like a resistance band, exercise band. I can actually grab one. Give me a second. Okay. So thankfully we were doing heaps of online consults during COVID, so we've got all these things handy now. Okay, so we can just tie something there, pull it across your body, so put a little bit of tension in the band, and then gently pushing it out in front of you. So what that looks like from the side is this. There, and just pushing it out in front of you. And what the band wants to do is to pull me back into that position, but I'm resisting that with my obliques on both sides, external and internal oblique on opposite sides. So that's quite a nice, easy one for anyone to do. But like I said, I think the best advice would be for anything specific like that is really to get in touch with the relevant person. So we've got women's health physios at the hospital. Bijal in the IPD team, I know, does women's health. She'd be a good person to just chat to and get a decent idea of exactly what the best thing for you to do would be. What else have we got here? I think that might.
Chris, there were a couple of questions which I had asked. I can ask them to you here instead of reading it.
Yes.
One was that, I started exercising recently. I mean, recently as in 4 or 5 years ago. Before that, I never exercised. So I'm sort of sometimes getting a little bit over enthusiastic. So I'm doing yoga, I'm doing gym, and now I have started swimming. So one question is, how much is too much? And how do we measure it? Would you recommend some apps or some bands or whatever?
Short answer is there's no such thing as too much. Again, this is probably pretty broken record. I could have just put this on repeat, but it's all relative to where you're coming from. So, if you go completely crazy from a standing start, you are more than likely going to break down at some point. But if you gradually add load, gradually, and everything else in your life obviously is in balance as well, because we can't. I think what we often do is we think of these things in sort of singularly. We don't like to look at the whole living organism and the whole sort of environment the organism is in. But things like stress, things like sleep patterns, diet, working hours, lifestyle outside of the exercise, all of these things need to be taken into account. So like in a relatively balanced state, so you'd refer to it as like how predictable is your lifestyle at the moment, how sort of stable is your lifestyle at the moment. So in a stable lifestyle where there's very few moving parts and things are relatively normal and relatively consistent, then gradually loading in that environment, you really shouldn't have any problems if you're responsible about how you load. It's in the people who, travel crazy distances, don't sleep much, maybe work crazy hours, high stress, things are up and down, and then they go to exercise as like a kind of outlet to manage that stress, but all they end up doing is adding extra stress into the system. And much like a glass of water or whatever, there's only so much water that can fit in. You have to start taking some water out before you can put extra water in. So there really isn't. There's not too much. Is not a black and white thing. Of course, there's too much in certain circumstances. And I suppose specifically, I would say, if you feel like you're doing too much, then you're doing too much. You listen to your body. Your body doesn't lie. Your body's going to tell you long before I tell you what's too much. And I don't mean, you wake up and you're like, oh God, I really don't feel like this, early morning workout today. Nobody feels like that early morning workout. Everybody feels like that. But if you're consistently like losing motivation for exercise, if you're starting to feel a little bit like depressed, or you're actually you're losing interest in training where it's something that you actually enjoy doing. You typically, you like going to your spinning classes, you like doing your cardio session, you like doing whatever. And after all, you just don't want to do it. These are all signs that you maybe are overtraining. But again, there's no line in the sand to say that X is too much. It needs to be taken in context. And you should respond to those things. Are you waking up painful? Are you starting these exercise sessions not fresh, fatigued? These are all signs that maybe you're doing a little bit too much and you just need to back off. Remember that when you rest and when you sleep is actually when the benefits of the exercise occur. That's when the changes happen. It doesn't happen during the exercise bout. The exercise bout is the stimulus, it's the stress. And then when you back off, your body has a chance to adapt to that. So if you're not backing off, you're not allowing your body to actually get the benefits of the stimulus. So it's really important to rest. But outside of that, if you're able to manage, you're feeling fresh and you're enjoying it, and you're really pushing yourself super hard, go for it. There's nothing really to stop you. Sorry, I've got a couple of your questions here. You also mentioned something about a fitness tracker. Do you need a fitness tracker?
Yeah.
That was you as well, huh? So absolutely not. I hate the concept of tracking your fitness. I hate the concept of wearing heart rate monitors and all this stuff. But they obviously have their place, and I'm not saying they're bad at all, not by any stretch of the imagination. I think they're fantastic in that they've made fitness more of a talking point. You know, everybody, you can see people who count their steps. It becomes a discussion point. People are interested. It makes people more accountable. It helps people to monitor their activity for whatever reason that they're looking at their activity. But the downside is that people start to obsess over how many steps they've taken. I have a patient at the moment who comes in and religiously tells me, I've done 7,000 steps today, I've done 8,000 steps. I could think of nothing worse than counting my steps every day, or even obsessing about my steps every day. I don't care. I don't want to care. But I think pros and cons, you know, if that's a motivator for you, then great, go for it. But it's certainly not something I would say that you need to have, and nothing that I would say that if you are getting into activity or whatever, you should monitor your steps. I don't think it's necessary. What else did you ask?
And there's a question by Vishal in the chat box. He has past experience of martial arts and weight training, but going back to it is getting tough day by day. Any tips on starting back?
Yeah, so I suppose it depends on how long ago it was. That it's going to get harder and harder the longer ago the martial arts was, and particularly something like martial arts, because it's pretty intense. It's pretty hard. You know, we're not talking about trotting down the road, you know, doing a light jog. You're talking about quite a high level of physical sort of requirement in the activity. What I would suggest is just to bite off little bits. Don't bite off more than you can chew. So break your martial arts expectation into small, manageable chunks. So let's say you is Vishal on the call? Maybe it might help to actually.
He's on the call.
Yeah,
Vishal, do you want to come on the?
Yeah, hi sir.
Hi. So what martial arts is that?
Taekwondo.
Taekwondo. Okay, so what does that involve?
Physical activities like using your legs too much, and some weighted trainings for your legs, like squats and doing deadlifts.
No, but the actual Taekwondo activity, what is it? Is it kicking? Is it punching? Is it throwing? Is it more judo-like? I'm not familiar with it.
It's only about kicking. You can't use your fists or hands are for blocking only.
Okay, and what would the training entail? You mentioned some squats and things. Are you looking at like?
Sorry.
What else are you looking at for training? Would you do squats?
Yeah, we used to do squats and leg stretches, lot of leg stretches, and we only used to focus on legs, and because we use that too much, like then again cycling and kicking a lot. Then what we can say, frog jumps. Those were our main exercises to enhance our leg power and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so based on what you said, I think frog jumps would be the last thing you'd get back to, because that's obviously going to be the hardest. I'm getting a lot of like feedback. Can you hear that? Is that?
I think it was coming from there. I've muted Vishal. Vishal, you can unmute yourself when you're talking.
Okay, so I think the frog jumps are obviously probably the most technical and toughest thing that you mentioned there. But like I said, try and break it into manageable chunks. So if it's a predominantly squatting or semi-squatting type of stance that you need to maintain to do Taekwondo, to be in for however many rounds or whatever, then I'd say try and start just doing squatting. Maybe try and do, pick 2 or 3 lower body exercises, perform them to fatigue maybe 2 or 3 times a week. outside of your taekwondo sessions, and then maybe on the alternate days you do taekwondo. So always try and give yourself 48 hours break between the same exercise is a good way to recover, and that's a pretty good general rule for anyone. Obviously, if you're doing something very power related, like your jumps, etc., then you might want to add an extra 24 hours. So that'll be 72 hours. And that's predominantly got to do with the energy systems that you're using, that you want to allow the energy systems to replenish themselves, but also just because it's new physical stress and you want that acute sort of response to happen and to be allowed to happen, and you want to recover. So I would say break it up into small manageable parts. That's probably the best advice. You know, if a sport requires, 5 fundamental things, I would say look at each of those fundamental things and maybe try and do one movement or one activity from each of those fundamental things, and gradually build on that. Week on week, you can add 1 or 2 things in. But the reality is, if you haven't been doing it for 15 years and you're in your 30s, it is going to be a little bit tricky to get back. Not to say that you can't do it, but just as long as you understand that and you're not trying to race back in 2 or 3 weeks to what you were doing when you were 21 years old.
We are at the top of the hour. Are there any questions to Chris? Amol, Sunil, Jaren?
I have a question. Hi, Chris. This is Dr. Amol. My question was, how do you have once we start with some sort of a fitness regime for us, and we are going on, but after some time, maybe after a few days or so, we start losing some motivation, and 1 or 2 days we skip. So what would you advise for maintaining the consistency and doing to continue with the regimen that we start with? So because many a time we go into this accretion and then we stop, and then it becomes a very long, huge gap, and then again we are back to the square one. So how do you suggest for the going on and maintaining the consistency?
This is really the I suppose the biggest trick to training. Motivation is the biggest thing. I would say that the best way to do it is probably combining some of the things I've said already. So start at a level that you can actually manage. Don't try and do what your friend can do. Don't try and join a class where you're really trying to play catch up from day one. You're not gonna last. Not sustainable. It needs to be something that you can do. The second thing is it needs to be something that you want to do. So you don't start doing something if you're like, God, I really don't feel like doing this. That's not going to last either. And then the third thing I think that's really, really important that people do not do enough is rest. Now, I know the concept is that we need to train to get fitter, and we're talking about what training can we do? How can we get fit? And the whole process is about active activities. What active intervention can I take in my life to make changes? But you can't get the benefit from an active intervention without afterwards resting and recovering. You have to give your body a chance to recover. If you keep going into session after session after session, and you're like gradually just emptying the tank, you're never ever going to last. You have to rest, relax. So at first, don't start more than 3 days a week. Give yourself 48 hours in between. If you do it 5 p.m. on a Monday, 5 p.m. on a Wednesday, do it again 48 hours later. So most of your energy systems should have been replenished, and it's a good way to start like that. If you do that and you gradually build up, you shouldn't lose. Look, there's no guarantees, but it should be a lot easier to sort of maintain that consistency.
Chris, I wonder whether an accountability partner also helps. So, for example, I know Anand and Sanket take a walk every day after lunch. And I think it's a wonderful thing to do, because then you are not only exercising, but you're also spending time with a friend. Like in my case, my accountability partner is my yoga trainer and my gym trainer, because without them, I know for sure that I'm never going to enter the gym. So I feel finding somebody who would do things with you, and you would enjoy not just the exercise, but spending time with that individual, I think is a great idea.
Absolutely, and that's the whole reason that team sports are a good thing. Because you're accountable to a team, you're letting people down. There's a social interaction before, during, and after, and that's why those things are so important. And that's why we encourage them in kids, is because we know that kids do not like doing sport. The reason they do sports, if you survey children between the age of 5 and 8, why are they playing? It's because their best friend plays. It's because they like, playing with their friends. It's because, like number 5 is because they like the sport. It's all about the community around it. So yeah, I totally get that. And that's probably a really, really good suggestion, is for anybody who's battling to maintain consistency, find somebody to keep you honest, find somebody to do it with you.
Any other questions for Chris? So while people are thinking about the last questions to ask, I thought, Chris, I will just summarize what you told us, that one is a simple thing to do at work is avoid taking escalators and elevators. Don't be obsessed about 10,000 steps, especially if you have desk job, which most of us do have, except our therapist is sitting at desk. So we need to do probably a little more than what we thought was enough. And also do what you like to do and not what you would, somebody else is doing. And yoga and walking are good enough. Focus on positive health benefits rather than a fitness number or a BMI. And always use a combination, focus on combination of diet and exercise. And function of the body is more important than, again, the numbers that you are talking about.
Yeah.
Also know your body and identify your body can do, cannot do. And as you mentioned, also start from, identify where you're starting from and not just jump into something extreme. I was also very confused about the heart rate part, which you explained very beautifully, that identify your maximum heart rate by doing extreme activity and then try to maintain it at 75% when you're doing other activities, and listen to your body, maybe find an accountability partner. So this was really wonderful because it gave us sort of a holistic view about exercise, because there's so much of confusion in our mind and many of us are not really exposed to doing regular exercises. So this was very useful explanation of all of this. Any last minute questions for Chris from anyone?
Yeah, one last question. So, in what way, Chris, the sports medicine helps in patient's care?
I didn't hear that.
In what way sports medicine helps in patient care?
How does it help in patients?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't mean in patients. He means how can sports medicine help patients? But Sanket, when you say patient, do you mean cancer patients or other patients?
Yeah, any patients who comes, basically the cancer patients, what we are dealing with.
So I think the biggest thing to understand is what sports medicine really is. Sports medicine is just medicine in the sporting environment. So, and what creates the sporting environment is the patient's expectations. So it doesn't have to be professional athletes. It doesn't have to be whatever. If you have a physical, sporting goal, then sports medicine is appropriate for you. So if it's, it could be an Olympic athlete who is recovering from some kind of, oncological treatment or whatever, however it works, they obviously might, be wanting to get back to their sort of the pinnacle of their sport. Or it could be somebody who, a 65-year-old who's had whatever, tumor removed, some radiation treatment, and they want to get back to their Sunday walks with their friends. There's no real difference in the principles of the approach that you would use. It's just the ceiling. Like, what is the limit? What is the distance that you push someone? And that's that's entirely decided on by their goals. But there's nothing really magical or different or weird about sports medicine. It's just medicine for people who have active goals. So that I think answers the question, I think.
Sanket, and your question actually gives me some ideas also. And Chris, I'll connect with you offline about how can, in the rehabilitation program that we run, Onco Rehab program, which Anjali is super, overlooking, has been a game changer for our patients. We have been doing it for last almost 4 years, and it's giving amazing results. Patients are much fitter, happier, quality of life is much better. But I think we can look at sort of trying to see if some of them want to push the boundary a little bit more, and can we develop a program for them where we help them to set some goals, fitness goals, and take it to the next level. I'll connect with you offline.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so in fact, yesterday only in our Friday meetings, we took up a paper presentation, as in Gagan presented that paper. So in which, as in an idea came up, which was like high intensity training for people, breast cancer patients after one year of the treatment. So that was something which had come up, and we were trying to, kind of put through ideas as to how we can build that particular, regime, or probably take it up as a project initially and then see how it works ahead. So that is as well something
I think
interesting.
let's discuss it, because my the way I look at oncology is, and especially from the rehab point of view for patients, is we not only have to give them fitness, but we also have to give them a direction and hope. And it's interesting, like I have some goal in my mind that I want to be this fit, and can we help our patients to move from the position of I'm a cancer patient and I'm really weak to I want to do this. So we'll connect offline, Chris and Anjali, and then we'll take it ahead there.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, Chris, I want to thank you for sparing your time and giving this excellent talk. If you don't mind, I think we'll share this talk with our colleagues also who are in the same profession. So I think it will help more people. And you kindly said that if we have any queries, we can reach out to you, which we will do hopefully. And
please do. Yeah, feel free to share my number with everyone or whatever. If somebody wants to send me a message, and we can chat like that, or come and see me in person, as I said, at the hospital, not a problem.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining. And Sanket, we need to sort of up our game a bit and become a more fitter department. We'll get there.
Yes.
All
sounds
right.
like you guys are on. It sounds like you guys are going the right direction. Anyway.
Yes, I think we are we are a very young team, and the beauty is our team is young, and it's also very enthusiastic. So we like doing different things and changes. So
I think honestly, if there's one sort of like parting message, I would just say, everyone wants to know what the best thing for this is and what's the best way to just do anything, do something. If you're not doing anything, do something. That's the way to start. Forget about, what's the best sport to get into. Forget about it. Move. Get up from your desk, move. Stand up, touch your toes, walk around. Literally, that is way more important than becoming a marathon runner or an elite swimmer or a fitness or yoga enthusiast. Just move, do things. Just let your body move.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
I hope you have a great weekend. Happy weekend, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.